I mean,
be very happy.
I get it, but yeah.
So, I think that's going to be a really good year. He has some ideas for things. And,
Right. Let alone this guy's
exactly.
above expectations.
But first, it's gorgeous.
Thank you, darling. Thank you.
Someone called it try the bike back.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna just out of the way because that's probably in your way, darling.
So I she had me thinking about you today. She was here this afternoon, and she was attending
I just don't want to offend you or go to the other good parts of life.
I'm just going to.
no, keep it.
No, I'm going to stick this.
Okay. So she's really interested.
Good.
Yeah,
Sort of elective surgery, educator and diversity coordinator.
skateboarding.
Yeah, she's really fascinating.
I was like,
Deanna?
There you go. I like that. Skydiving.
Stevenson.
Skydiving. You're skydiving. I like that. Skydiving. Yeah, skydiving.
yes,
I like that one. I like it. Skydiving. That works. I'll go with it. We still Miss Eva list.
What?
I still gotta figure out. Look, I'm dripping all over here. I gotta still figure out what's good for you.
Yes. Yes.
all right, so I'm not really putting my back to you. I'm just going to
That's
prop
okay.
up my
I'm
leg.
not offended.
Okay. Good.
Today is 9:24 already.
Like a hole in my lip or something. Dripping all down the front of me. Thank goodness it's water.
It's quiet over there.
I see you've got a trolley.
Where's Todd? No Todd?
Scooter.
Coming and probably move over and give me more space.
I'm already sore from
Okay.
crutches because I have to use them on the stairs, but
That's right.
not
As long
just
as
scooting
I'll
around.
just all move
Because it's a
over
foot
then.
injury, not a knee injury.
My husband's battery's there.
Like battery, car
I
battery?
got to count my battery.
He's at piano, he has piano with my son.
Eventually, do you
I'm gonna
move
run back
to
out.
crutches, or is this what you'll have all
Run
along?
back, all right?
Sounds good.
I'll
Hello, sir.
probably eventually go to just crutches to assist.
All right,
I just can't be any Wayfaring right now.
all right.
You just want
Does she need a ride?
I gotta go look into a tutor, I gotta go probably jump Matt's car, I'll be back.
that you have to
Oh. She has to jump out of the car.
Yikes.
The joys of parenting.
Multi-car family. Chief, well, how are you?
It got really cold between yesterday and today.
I don't mind this stuff.
I definitely am undressed for going out.
I don't mind. It's pretty good.
Thank you.
What's up, Ken? All right, sir. Cal.
But of course, I feel like
Is this our paycheck?
yeah, okay.
Feeling better?
I'm definitely feeling better. I'm
Thank you.
living.
Good.
So no more oxycodone.
Oh,
I thought you
sure.
were gonna pass it out. Chair with
I
the-
didn't see him right there.
Well, it's funny you can tell the difference that I broke.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Let's start off with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Some quick announcements. Mrs. Stevenson had to leave to take care of a family issue. I'm sure she'll be back. This is a meeting where we really get into the deep plans that often create meaningful impact for our students, whether it be special education, whether it be technology that we're bringing forward, as well as our teachers in terms of professional development. So these are the things where we really get into the meat of the topic as far as we can go look into a plan. Most of these presentations will be, I would say, in a very conversational way, because we find that that's how we can better integrate in those conversations. So sort of a double-edged approach that I think has worked to serve us very well. So at this point, can we adopt an agenda? Can I have a motion? Mr. Rajat, Mrs. Hoffman, any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? All right. Let's turn it over to, before I go further, the study session is designed for the purpose of administrative updates to the board. No public comments here. Residents may attend the next scheduled business meeting on October 8th or contact the board by email at bohn.org. If there are any comments or questions, all questions come into the Office of the Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and the superintendent As appropriate, policy questions and concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions and concerns typically addressed by the superintendent and or designate. So at this point, let's turn over to Dr. Robinson for superintendent comments.
Sure, just actually want to remind the board of a few upcoming events and committees that the board is on. We have a facilities committee meeting on the 2nd, Mr. DeLallo and Mr. Gilbert, and we'll be talking about the current projects we're doing, the projects that are pending, and sharing some thoughts on a potential future referendum ideas, recognizing that we're always, quote unquote, under construction. So I'm looking forward to that meeting. We have a PTA council meeting also on 10/2. Unfortunately, that meeting I won't be able to attend. I'm hoping that maybe Dr. Wood will be there to provide a report on behalf of the administration. If not, we have someone in attendance at the meeting. Professional practices meeting, we have Mrs. Stevenson, who's on professional practices, and that's going to be on 10/3. We also have a SAFE committee meeting on 10/7 coming up. So that's, again, another one of those large committee meetings. For fun stuff, tenure reception on 10/8. It's a great opportunity to recognize those individuals who are actually now tenured teachers effective September 1, but we always do a nice ceremony afterwards as a recognition. We also have the Athletic Hall of Fame, and the green and white should be on the same night. So I know myself and Mrs. Stevenson will be going to one, leaving one early, getting to one hopefully on time. So the Athletic Hall of Fame will be in the Hilton, and the green and white will be in High School East Auditorium. So a lot of things coming up this time of the year. So again, just trying to keep reminders on your calendar. Speaking of a lot of things coming up, as Mr. Preston pointed out, this is the time of the year where we provide an overview of some of the major plans that drive a lot of activities within the school district. Recognizing that a lot of these plans, in many cases, a lot of the content doesn't necessarily change significantly from year to year, because consistency is something that we also strive for in our plans. So as Dr. Wood and several others come to present, the focus will be to provide some highlights, and then see what questions and the board would like to have, and take it from that stance, instead of us standing here and going through details with you, and quite frankly, details that you have, and if you haven't read, that you can always have at your disposal to read as well. So we want to keep it in that format as we go through the night. And as you'll see later on the agenda, we'll be asking the board to adopt those plans, because we're using those plans effectively right now as we speak as well. So that's the correlation with that. And just one other agenda thing. Thank you very much for the indulgence of having the 2 additional action items on the agenda. Staffing is always one of those. We try to get people on board as fast as we can, and any changes of staffing we try to have approved so we can engage other processes as we move forward. In the license agreement, it's a timing issue. We want to have the board approved before we initiate the relicensing with the Dell agreement. So again, thank you for your indulgence with those 2 items. So at this point, I'll turn over to Dr. Wood, and we'll go from there.
Great. So we're actually starting off with the survey, the Clarity Survey.
I think it might be up already top. So yeah, that's the only one though.
Great. So those of you who are on our District Instructional Technology Integration Committee, aka DITIC, are familiar with the fact that each year we have been administering a nationally normed technology survey, so that we are able to kind of track how we are doing with our students and the quality of our technology integration. Before I turn it over to Gail Petrofessa, who does a great job of pulling our survey results together and presenting it in a meaningful way, I will first say we very much appreciate using a national instrument, because it gives us data relative to other districts, and along with a national survey comes things that we don't necessarily agree with or would not be asking, and also things that we would ask other things in lieu of. So it's one of those, you take what you get for a nationally normed survey. We're very pleased with the results. We do think that they would be wise to amend the nationally normed survey. However, you know what that means. If they do that, then you have a few years where you really have no data, because you have no comparative statistics. But I think overall the news is very good in terms of technology integration, and so I'll have Gail Petrofessa, a lead teacher for technology K-5, provide an overview.
We've been doing this Clarity Survey for the last 4 years, and as you can see, our scores have gone up each year. We currently fall on the high end of what Clarity considers proficient, and we're about 9 points away from the advanced level. Okay. So if we go to so the next slide breaks out elementary, middle, and high school scores in the 4 main areas, which are classroom access, skills, and environment. And you can see that access is our strongest area, where middle and high school fell in the exemplary range, and elementary is just below that in advanced. And I think that reflects the district's commitment over the last few years to really invest in one-to-one mobile devices and all that's happening in the classroom to support those. And it's also worth noting that our scores surpass both the New York average and the national average for those who also participated in this survey. And then finally, although we did well across the board, we know that there's always potential areas for growth. And one of those potential areas would be in use of the 4 C's, which refers to critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. And so in doing this survey, it gives us the data to say, hey, this is an area where through coaching or professional learning, we can perhaps target efforts to make teachers realize that, having having children solve real-world authentic problems using technology-based solutions would be an enhancement. And so hopefully we can use this data to move forward in that direction. Questions? Great.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I was looking at the relative position of middle school and high school on various proficiencies, and it occurred to me that perhaps the reason why the high school lags a little bit behind the middle school has to do with, well, first of all, the whole thing is collective. It's cumulative. So you would think that perhaps the high school would be higher than the middle school. However, I'm thinking that probably we instituted some changes in program that haven't quite grown through the system, and thus at some point perhaps we'll see the high school make a sudden jump or relatively quick jump. Is that fair?
Yeah, we anticipate that. The middle school grade 6 was 2 years ahead in terms of the one-to-one rollout for grade 6, and then 7th grade and 8th grade came on together, and then 9 through 12. And it does take time for teachers to feel like they are really able to fully plan and integrate use of the devices. So I think that is a very fair thought. I mean, we're pleased with the high school overall. We're pleased with the elementary results as well. But I do think that's why you see the middle school having a slight uptick over. The other thing I would point out that Gail mentioned is areas we want to focus on. Sometimes, again, nationally normed survey, we're not sure when it's a vocabulary issue. Is it that when they refer to the 4 C's that the students, the parents, the teachers who are taking the survey may not understand exactly what that means? And if you don't give them an example of, like the time you worked in groups of 4 doing a collaborative document, shared document in Google Classroom, if they don't make that connection, we don't spend a lot of time using the 4 C's terminology. It almost feels a little jargony to us, so we haven't. So that's when you don't know when it drives you further from what your actual measure would be.
And you can't add to that.
We
Because
can't
it's a national survey.
Exactly, yeah. But it leaves us with questions that we end up asking ourselves. Like, if we use that terminology more, would we have a slightly different result? But overall, we are very pleased with the outcomes. We are pleased to see that we trend up over time.
As far as how to address the potential area for growth, is this something that should be addressed on the IPAC side, where maybe you encourage teachers to integrate more technology, or integrate their instruction in there, or is it on the technology side, or is it both?
I think as we move to the next presentation, which is the tech plan overview, where we look at profile of an engaged classroom, the more we can talk about the integration of technology for the sake of high levels of learning, the more it naturally comes. So it's really about, another opportunity. We have the updated standards rollout. As academic leaders work with teachers, breaking down the standards, when they can have meaningful conversations about how could technology help students learn this standard at a higher level, that's kind of the natural way, as opposed to saying, let's just, really pleased. We're kind of not so much talking about technology for the sake of technology anymore. It's really about the learning first, and then what are the ways that technology can help us either be more efficient, engage at a level we were never able to, students being able to go out and find answers on their own, questioning each other, giving each other feedback, things that just weren't possible before. So it's really about the high levels of learning first.
You know, another part of it is when we rolled out the sixth grades a few years ago, that was the first one. And this year, as I was watching the progression with the kids in the class, this year's eighth graders in history are now using the digital book. And my daughter is ninth grade, so she didn't get to do that, but she saw the progression. And so we're not just saying, okay, you get this Chromebook, you use it for this and this, and it's done. It's constantly every year being added to. So
Right.
those scores will continue to rise over time because of that.
I think so, and as much as I say that, I have a funny feeling that they're going to realize that they need to redo their survey. As you know, we're not the only ones finding that it's really more about the conversation about teaching and not so much about some of the questions that they do ask, even though we still like the instrument.
Thank you.
Great. All right, great, thank you. So the Shenendehowa Technology Plan really presented on behalf of Ken McDermott, who does a tremendous amount of work, the entire team at IMS, and I noticed that Mark Simpkins is with us. We'll wave to Mark in the back, one of the dedicated staff members at IMS, and also Gail Petrofessa, John Bullington, folks that really put a lot of energies into developing our Shenendehowa Technology Plan. And you'll notice it starts just where we left off with the Clarity Survey, which is really what is the profile of an engaged classroom? What are we looking to do? Because technology for technology's sake, it's great for efficiency in our offices, and it's nice for students to be able to organize themselves. But the real takeaway over time is that it increases and it creates many more authentic learning opportunities for our students, where they can creatively solve real-world problems, where they have more opportunities for choice because there is so much built within various digital platforms, like the new tech book for middle school social studies, things that we would not otherwise have been able to expose our students to. Students being able to assess their own progress on a number of platforms, including Google Classroom, and like digital forms that students are using, where teachers are setting up the quiz and students get immediate feedback on how they're doing. And that leads us to looking at what is the overall, the image to the far left is the Future Ready Framework guidelines, and you'll notice that the tech plan has been organized by the key components of the Future Ready Framework, which really all things lead back to providing an opportunity for personalized student learning in the classroom. Sticking with the theme of what we're looking for, where you have the red circle, we really want the most complex thinking balanced with sophisticated technology. And I was thinking, what's an example of that? One piece of software that we have been using in the district is called Satori. I don't know if you've heard of it. It really is so interesting in that students can build their own, I'll say, digital timelines, where it would have been paper, pencil-based, or very static, but now they're able to embed active video clips, images, create their own narrative, and it is really like a very sophisticated report that students can do, where they're constructing information and synthesizing information from many different sources. And they end up with this really beautiful digital product, one where they can be really proud of the design. But that's just like one example of many types of offerings that we have across the district, that because we have the robust infrastructure that we have, because the technology plan we've planned for the one-to-one grades 6 through 12, we have extended one-to-one to grades 4 and 5 with the caveat that the devices do stay in the classroom. They do not go home at night, but now we have worked toward having every student be able to grab the device when they need it for writing tasks. It certainly has helped us with computer-based instruction, but also a lot of the platforms, like you say, the instructional materials, like the social studies, but many others have digital content that students can access now. They're not open all day, that's for sure, but when you need them, they're there, and they are definitely engaging for students. Some of the work that we've been doing in the last year that is reflected in our 2019-20 technology plan, which, by the way, we do upload to the State Education Department, is the continued rollout of one-to-one for grades 4 and 5. Something interesting, we started the help desk last year, which you're aware of, at High School East and High School West. You know, we had 9,056 visits to the help desk at West and East combined. Yeah. And students doing great work. They also, the best of our calculation was 298 repairs completed on Chromebooks by students attending the help desk. And I think about what a great benefit that is to our organization, but I actually think how great it is for the students. What a wonderful experience to learn, you know, that kind of customer service, to problem solve with other students, and then they're able to carry that forward. And I understand that we have some students in CIP this year, which is our career exploration internship program, who are actually working and helping to oversee the help desk at East, and then accruing some course credits for it as well. Also in the technology plan, the Smart Schools Bond Act, which you are aware of, and that is continuing to move forward with updated phone systems and security enhancements, and really just trying to make sure that we're balancing in that tech plan. How do we modernize our system, like the Smart Schools Bond Act, but also really keep the focus on student learning? Any questions related to the technology?
As we introduce more and more one-on-one devices throughout the grade levels, is there an arithmetic addition to the call on our bandwidth, or do some grade levels perhaps utilize their devices differently and not necessarily access the bandwidth to the same degree to, say, a higher level class?
Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. Yes, it definitely puts more stress on the bandwidth, but we've built out for that. In fact, we tripled our bandwidth this year, and when we wrote the RFP for our internet subscription, we did it in such a way that we had the option to go to 10 times what we had last year within the terms of that contract. So we have plenty of headroom there.
My oldest student had I think, a very good experience with the Sienna Physics. Okay, and I think that was noteworthy. Cam, you might agree or disagree because you're taking this course, but what we found this year is that college physics is well prepared if you take that class, because it's the way then the homework is challenging because if you don't get it right with the units and decimal points, but it forces the student to think. And I'm trying to figure out where it is on that scale. Is that rote, or is that on the far right? But that would be worth looking at, because I agree there's things like Satori that could do reports. There's also kind of on the math science side where you're not often writing a report. You're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to get an answer, and you're trying to put it in. And it just seems that course had a way where that got you to think as you did the homework. That enabled a higher level of thinking during the homework. You may disagree, but it seems like that really prepared my student well for the college experience. And that may be the kind of things you want to look at to put in here. You know, where is that on the scale? And that might get you to expand to other areas like math and science.
Yeah, I think I need a little more time to think on that, but I think what you're getting at are the things that we take for granted, or I may not even be standing here mentioning, that we are able to do because of technology. And certainly there are enhancements in the math and science areas as well. I look at some of what our middle school math teachers have been able to do as a result of the integration of devices, unbelievable. The administering of mini assessments via a digital platform called eDoctrina, where they can immediately see student learning results. So I think to your point, it is broader, and the impact is great in many areas.
If I could add to that, because I am getting feedback. It happened last year too. Once they get off to college and they say, oh, it would have been very helpful if this was offered at Shen, if I could have, learned to, you hear also feedback, whether it's specific to the rigor of a course or tools that help you get organized. And so it's along both of those tracks. But do we survey, or is there any way to survey to get feedback, or is there a mechanism so that we could get feedback from the kids that are exiting, that, to just see what they would recommend, or what?
There's a senior survey.
Yeah,
There is. So is it a survey when they leave, or is it a survey like a follow-up, to a way to I would like a place to redirect people, is what I'm saying. If they come to me and they say, in fact, I just got a letter, and I'd like to say, that's really good feedback. Here's who you should go to.
I'll send something out to the board to say exactly when they do the surveys.
And I know through a school partnership team, not only do it right at the end of the school year, but also after the first semester after they go to college. So usually by the spring semester of the
They're gonna
college
get
year,
something.
they send out another opportunity for the kids to share.
That's
So
We
it's
do want to
the
hear it.
results are great, yeah.
We want to know.
It's really interesting to hear the results.
Excuse me, I'm thinking about an evolution as to how things are done. And I have to use the comparison with medicine, okay? 20 years ago, somebody came in, they had a bad knee, an orthopod would manipulate the knee and so forth, and they would know by the feel, sound, so forth, watching somebody walking, exactly what the problem was. They didn't really need an MRI or whatever. Then they added the MRI in, and that perhaps gave them even more precise diagnosis. But over time, with the younger generation of doctors coming in, they no longer could diagnose by manipulating the knee. That may or may not be good or bad. I don't mean to attach that to the teaching aspect of it. But have we moved from a point where the teacher was operating essentially without technology to using technology as an augmentation to essentially a whole different approach, which is heavily laden and dependent on technology?
Yeah, that's a yes and no. There are certain lessons that teachers do, and I'll say like writing in many of the high school English classes. It's very much dependent on technology. Not to say students can't sit and do it, but the outcome, the opportunity for feedback is so much richer when you use the technology. I think that if we were to have a day where our network wasn't available to us, we would definitely have some teachers saying, oh, I really missed that. And yet we walk into classroom after classroom where they're used for a bit of time and then they're away. That they can get to certain work faster, and then it's time for the Socratic seminar where everybody's putting their chairs in a circle and having conversation. And we really do see a mix of that. In fact, we as an admin team have really worked on our language to make sure that when we're talking about technology integration, it is focused on elevating learning, because what we didn't want was folks to think, oh, I have to hurry up and make sure people see me using these devices or having students use these devices, and yet the outcome was some sort of low level leading, where they could have done it without or absent the technology. We still want them to be able to do it absent the technology, right? That's why we still teach mental math. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. All right, so another plan that we submit annually to the State Education Department is the Shenendehowa Professional Development / Learning Plan. This plan is really put together by Anna Sugarman, our professional learning coordinator, and the work is done collectively across the district by our 5 coaches. So we have Anna Sugarman, Gail Petrofessa, John Bullington, Julie Brunetter, Vanessa Kramer, all doing their own various pieces of supporting teachers in their ongoing learning to be their very best on behalf of our students, and our entire administrative team. who are always doing professional development with their teachers, and a number of teachers who step forward and run professional development at all levels, including in our summer academy. So there are a number of areas of focus, and you got the sense as you looked through the professional learning plan that it talks about the different modes of delivery and the different areas of focus. But this slide really talks about some of the areas in particular that we focus on to support our teachers and their ongoing growth. And it really is beyond teachers at this point. This is a look at our entire system and the learning of all individuals and staff who contribute to the experience for our students. You see at the top of the purple circle where we have school and classroom experience. This is all clearly based very much heavily on our goals document, but we're still talking about that profile of an engaged classroom like we just saw with the technology plan. The school improvement planning through ESSA, which is the new accountability structure where it was No Child Left Behind, and it's now the ESSA planning. We are doing some work with schools and leaders digging into our student performance data now that we have a new lens by which we look at, but we're working on our language about notice and wondering protocols that we're doing as we look at data and learning about our system. But there's professional learning all around that. You could pass out data and a whole bunch of people could see a whole bunch of different things, but the number one thing we find people see is what could I do better? And we'd like to take a breath and say, what are the areas we've done really well on, and let's celebrate that also. And then before we jump to conclusions about why in a certain area we may need to grow, let's not limit our thinking so much initially. Let's be very broad in our discovery and exploration before honing in so discreetly in an area. And so that's some of the work that we're doing around our school improvement planning. Obviously, we've talked about the integration of technology. I mentioned eDoctrina, which is a platform where we assess students. I won't go through each of these, but you'll see in every area we have specific focus areas. One thing, and I will mention under organizational culture and environment, where it says collaborative engagement, we have been able to bring in RBERN, and I wish I remembered what RBERN stood for, but it is a cooperative, it's an arm of the State Education Department that operates out of Questar BOCES, specifically designed to provide professional development to school districts in support of their students learning English and the teachers of students learning English. And Sarah Chaffee worked very closely with them last year and brought in a number of great professional development opportunities, which then led to Sarah Chaffee and Michelle Milat talking about collaborative engagement, working together on how do you differentiate between a learning disability and whether the struggles the student is presenting as is really about learning the language, right, and separating between the two. And so there are a lot of interesting kind of overlays that we see. We present professional development on because it's very often not just about the learning the language, it could be about identifying special needs as well, and where these various topics overlap with different departments as students progress through. A lot of work on mental health and wellness. Becky Carmen has been going around working with school leaders in almost all of our schools, if not all of our schools. Under personnel and professionalism, I want to draw your attention to the 4-year teacher induction program. Maybe I'm off base here. I think it's the richest program in the state in terms of most comprehensive supports for teachers coming into the system. I'll say I specifically work with teachers in year 3 as they do their own action research, and the power of teachers asking themselves professional questions, collecting data as a practitioner in the classroom, and then answering those questions, and then figuring out how they're going to improve their practice based on feedback that they got. It's very powerful. So, and we're doing that every single year for our teachers as they're moving through a 4-year new teacher induction program. So that's just a 10,000-foot highlight about the professional development we offer teachers, administrators, staff throughout the district. This plan will be submitted to the State Education Department, and you'll notice that the very back of the plan had outside providers that we anticipate using, as that is a requirement for teachers to maintain their certification if they're under the new licensure from the state. They must accrue CTLE credits, continuing education credits, and they have to be from certified providers that were listed on our professional development plan. Any questions?
Again, I'm asking questions tonight. Over a number of years, we've tried to build up a library of modules for individual topics and so forth, so that teachers could access that at any time, which is much more convenient than going to a certain place at a certain time. So the first part of the question, have we continued to develop more and more modules? The second part of it is, has the availability of those modules, which in effect probably make the more elementary or mundane type of topics available without going to large-scale instruction, made it possible for our large-scale groups and gatherings to be more sophisticated and accomplish more than they might have in the past.
Maybe in some cases. So I can give you an example that this summer, Anna ran a homework and grading virtual professional development. So it was great for families or teachers who were away, out of town in the summer, didn't find, have childcare, whatever. And they went back and forth digitally. We don't have tremendous demand for people wanting to take something that feels static to them. There is something about coming and sitting and engaging with other people in learning together that tends to be more, I'll say, popular with teachers. I don't know off the top of my head the exact number of modules we have built. We do have several. Actually, probably the best example of the modules are John Bullington continuing to develop a library of the latest updates in Google. Or it might be a 2 or 3 minute video for teachers to see updates to the student information system where they enter grades in the grade book and the functionality of it. That is a place where a very quick access to a video clip is perfect, as opposed to a deeper topic where you probably want to share perspectives and build off of each other and learn alongside colleagues. Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm presenting to you the special education plan for the district. As you will notice, there are very few changes this year. This plan is a plan that is actually mandated by Part 200 regulations by the state, that we developed this plan, and it's very prescribed. And what it does is it seeks to take the regulations of the state and put them into a more user-friendly language and include specifics that are unique to our district. So you will see that all of our programs are described, the fact that we access sub-CSEs for many of our CSE meetings is noted in the plan. The class numbers, enrollment is also all updated within the plan. So the one new piece of the plan that we have this year is that we have opened up a second small move classroom. And if you recall, that is our mobility opportunities via education. I hope you had an opportunity to see it when you did your tour. We have 11 students, and we really didn't have room in the program, in the classroom this year. So we opened up a second small space. The teachers are working together, and one of our goals for next year is to renovate a space in High School West, and our hope is that we will then have 2 permanent classrooms. We have a few students who are in out-of-district placements we'll be able to bring back, and we will be able to run a elementary, middle school, and then a high school program for our students aged 5 through 21. So that's very exciting. Another goal that we have is we have a big focus this year on our ESSA data and really taking a look at our students' performance, our students with disabilities, and meeting our 2 academic administrators at elementary, and our middle school administrator will be meeting with small groups of teachers, looking at data, and really working hard to identify what is standing in the way of our students who are not graduating with a diploma. So that is a big goal for this year. Also, the science of reading is a goal. I'm sure all of you have heard. There's been a lot of talk. It just seems to be increasing about how we're teaching our students reading. And as you know, the fact that a student is classified as a student with a reading disability doesn't mean we stop teaching them reading. That is obviously a lifelong skill, and we are working hard collaboratively with our AIS department to ensure that we are providing the best practice and instruction for our students who are struggling with reading. We are also working on developing our student independence and empowerment. That is one of the indicators in ESSA, and it's something that I think often we don't always think about first when we think about our students with disabilities. They have a voice too, and we need to hear from them what works, what doesn't work, what they would like to see change so that they can be more successful. And then lastly, of course, staff development. We provide a lot of staff development. We'll be working on developing goals because, as we know, in order to achieve what we want students to achieve, we have to have very clear, relevant goals that are based on supporting our students achieving and accessing the standards. We're always also working on IEPs and how to write good IEPs because the IEP is the cornerstone of the program. So there's lots of professional development going on at all times. And those are the goals of our plan. Any questions about the special education plan? Thank you, Gary.
When Anita Murphy came in as DS at Capital Region BOCES, she was enamored of a particular program for either Asperger's or generally autism
The
spectrum.
TEACH program. Mm-hmm.
And as a consequence, that was implemented at Capital Region BOCES.
Yes.
Are we part of the adoption of that kind of program? Have we decided to go our own way or whatever?
So when that program was brought on, the person in charge of special education at the time said that once they had fully developed their own staff, they would look to open up TEACH trainings within the district. I definitely think that that's worth taking a look at. There are certainly a multitude of methodologies that are recommended for students with autism. Our program, especially our program at Octave, that is a K through 5 program, is very effective. So we would absolutely be interested in looking at that. We do have a teacher at Octave who is trained in the TEACH program. She was in England and was trained in the TEACH program. So they have a very tight PLC, and I'm sure that they are sharing all of those best practices. But it also depends on the student. So for some students, we use a more strict ABA approach. It really depends. But yes, we are interested in looking into that.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
With the MOVE program, you said that the goal is to open something in High School West.
Yes.
Is that for the middle schoolers too, or it would be a separate?
So because students go from 5 to 21, we would most likely have our elementary program be somewhere 5 to 12 or 13, and then our high school program would be 14 to 21.
Elementary-based
Yes,
program.
elementary-based
Okay.
program, yes.
And the goal is before the end of the year or next year?
The goal is to open in September,
Oh, okay.
yes. Yes.
I looked on your plan, page 12 shows that we're 20% higher on preschool special education. Anything
Yes.
causing that or concerns?
Well, one thing that may be causing it, which is not necessarily a bad thing, is that more and more pediatricians and professionals working in early child care centers are recognizing that, especially students with speech articulation. Certainly, we have an increase in students who are diagnosed with autism, so that certainly feeds into the preschool system. But it's really a good thing that more and more providers are recognizing students with very early speech articulation difficulties. Our goal is for them to get that therapy right away, early on, so they don't require that service as they enter kindergarten. And it is so critical in language and reading development that they can hear sounds and replicate sounds. It's critical for reading. So we're not running out to find additional students who require special education services at that level, but we are very interested in intervening as early as we can.
I think Naomi answered.
Okay.
I was looking at basically the same answer, same question with a number. Thank you.
Yes.
The county is responsible for preschool special ed, right?
They are responsible for providing the services. Yes, and they pay for the evaluations.
So then if we do play a role in early identification, does the county have the capability, or do we then assume the responsibility, but at county expense, shall we say, for following through on that?
So fortunately, at this point, we have not had a situation where we have not been able to find providers for our preschool students. If that became an issue, then we would look to employ and bill the county. Yes. You're welcome.
Very exciting.
And then I'm moving on. Oh, good, you have it up. So the Student Support Services Plan. You will see the graphic says MTSS. That stands for Multi-Tiered Systems, MTSS, Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. It's a relatively new term in this area, and we are starting to use it, especially at the secondary, because it represents a way to screen and identify students with various needs, not just academic needs. So one of our goals as a district this year, as a leadership team and also as an instructional team, is to take a look at our Student Support Services Plan, both from the RTI lens, the response to intervention, which is the process we go through to identify students who are at risk and how we support those students through increasing intense levels of intervention, and then also our academics services that we provide, and looking beyond that. So a long-term goal would be to have our mental health, our social, emotional, all of those components under one plan, which would fall under MTSS. So the plan that you have in front of you, does not have significant revisions. It is probably the same as last year's plan as we go through this process of looking at everything that we do. And again, to reiterate, RTI, the beginning of the plan, is about the process we go through. It's a problem-solving process to identify students at risk and then to provide support for them. The second part of the plan is how are we providing the support, and that is our academic intervention services. So our goals, one major goal is to really take a look at our screening tools. We are not consistent in every building on how we screen students, so we want to take a look at that in all areas. We're also looking at our Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions to make sure that they are truly research-based and that we have a structure in place for providing Tier 2, which is outside the classroom, but in addition to instruction, not in place of classroom instruction, and then our Tier 3, which is much more intense service. And then we're also looking at the tools that we're using. So right now we have a lot of different tools that we use to support students who are struggling in reading and math and behavior, social, emotional. We want to take a look and basically do an audit of all of those tools and come up with a more unified system so that we're sure that students are getting an equal experience in all of the schools, regardless of the school. Questions about the plan?
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
Michelle.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's move over to action items, and mostly this is plan adoption. So can I have a motion on the special education plan? Mr. Gilbert, second, Mrs. Rajat. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor?
Who was the, sorry, that was
I was
Simon,
probably up to
Todd,
abstain from that one.
and Christina, okay.
Should I abstain?
What's that? No, I mean.
Is that okay? Because I did read it before.
Yeah,
I know.
I think it's up to you. It's your decision.
Is that abstention or not?
No, I'll
Okay.
vote for it because I did read it.
And let's go to item B, Student Services Plan, AIS and RTI. Can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Miller, second. Mrs. Rajat, any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? And let's go to the Technology Integration Plan. Motion on this, Mr. Gilbert, second. Mr. DeLallo, any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Professional Development Plan, can I get a motion on this? Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Stevenson, second. Any comments? All in favor? And let's go to staffing recommendations.
Thank you again for having staffing recommendations tonight. We have 3 appointments. Jacqueline Spinelli is going to be joining the special education staff at the middle school. I'm not sure if Jacqueline is here. Okay. Tamara Thorpe-Odom will be joining the preschool and elementary level as academic administrator for special education, and Tamara is here. Tamara would stand up. Excuse me, Dustin Berga is going to be, he's already at the high school. He's moving from the health teacher to class assistant principal, and Dustin, I believe, is here as well. All right. We have a couple of retirements that I would like to make note of, please. Susan Butera is retiring after 21 years as a typist in the school counseling office, November 22nd. And Susan Zalewski is retiring after 12 years in food service. So those are the staffing recommendations.
Can I have a motion on this one? Mr. Gilbert, second, Mrs. Miller. Any comments? If not, all in favor? And final item is the licensing agreement through Dell. Can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Stevenson, second. Mr. Gilbert, any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Okay, I think we covered everything very succinctly. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Hoffman, second. Mrs. Miller, all in favor? Thank you. Done.
That was awful.